When I was a kid, I never thought one of my parents would die. Never even considered it as a possibility. So, when my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 esophageal cancer before my sophomore year of high school, I thought for sure he'd survive. He was invincible. He was the one who woke me up every day before school. He was the one who took me to the farmer's market every Saturday. Even when he was admitted to the hospital with fungal pneumonia, I thought he would live. Even when he was intubated. Even when the doctors suggested we withdraw life support the next day, I thought for sure he'd wake up overnight. He didn't. He took his last breath, and only then did I realize he wasn't as invincible as I thought. My dad was my hero. No, he is my hero. And he died when I was 15 years old. I never got closure when he died. One day I had my dad, and the next he was dead. Nothing made sense anymore, and my whole body hurt. It was like I could feel the earth spinning, but my world stood still, so I was constantly tripping over my own feet, struggling to keep my balance. Existing was dizzying, and breathing was excruciating. I mean every word of this when I say that I didn't know if I would survive that pain. Life felt so pointless without him. I don't sugarcoat this, and I don't tiptoe around it because nobody ever talked to me about grief. So I was nowhere near ready for the insurmountable pain it brings. I don't think you can ever be ready for a loved one to die, but the lack of conversations made the already devastating loss even harder. I learned very quickly that I hadn't been alone in my ignorance of grief and death. When I went back to school after my dad died, it was beyond disorienting. Nobody talked to me about him. In fact, nobody talked to me at all. Everyone went on with their day as if I wasn't even there while I was fighting just to keep up. Just sitting upright in class took all my energy, but no one seemed to notice. It hit me that their lives didn't dramatically change. Only mine did. And no one wanted to face grief and death as intimately as I was facing it, so they avoided me. At the time, I was so angry at everyone, but looking back, I can't blame anyone for their reactions. We don't adequately prepare young people for what to expect when someone dies. But the only thing promised in life is death. So why are we so terrified to talk about it? I spent the rest of high school a completely different person. No one wanted to talk to me, so I shut down. I stopped caring about pretty much everything. I don't remember the content of the classes I took my junior year. My extracurriculars became obligations. I had loved singing and playing instruments, but those things didn't make me happy anymore. Nothing did. I was a shell of the person I used to be. Deep down, all I wanted was someone to talk to, but no one ever gave me the opportunity. That is, until my senior year, when I took an ethics class and the syllabus said we'd take one day at the end of the year to talk about grief. Finally, I would have an opportunity to say what I'd been bottling up for so long. I spent the entire year looking forward to this class. It was all I could think about. But a week before the day I'd been looking forward to, we were told the grief lecture would be canceled due to lack of time. I was crushed. I mean, how could one of the most human experiences be tossed aside because of time? And how could we possibly be prepared to enter the world as adults if we aren't equipped to cope with loss? I asked about reinstating the class, but I was met with an immediate no. That was the last straw. I was done being silent. I'd bottled up my grief for the convenience of others for too long, so I marched back to my classmates and told them how disappointed I was that the class was canceled. I was devastated. I had never felt more invalidated and alone. But the next day, to my surprise, a handful of my classmates asked to reinstate the class. I was even more surprised that it was enough to change his mind, and he agreed to hold the class after all. That was the first time I felt like someone really cared about my grief. I smiled for what felt like the first time since my dad died. During the grief class, my classmates asked me things like what they could have done differently to support me and how I managed to navigate a world without one of my parents. I told them to just be there for someone who's grieving. I told them that their discomfort would never be as great as a grieving person's pain. I was honest and told them that I have no idea how I get through life without my dad. I have no choice. I just do it. I was happy with what I'd said by the time the class ended, and I thought to myself, if even one of my classmates got something out of that, it was worth it. But it was more than just one person. I had 5 lengthy messages from classmates, thanking me for speaking and promising to approach a grieving friend differently in the future. My class had 27 other people in it, and 5 of them reached out to me. That's 18.5%. That's a percentage that I am unbelievably proud of because far too many children are grieving unsupported. And even if only 18.5% of the people in their life are supportive, well, that's a start. According to childrensgriefawarenessday.org, 1 in 12 children in the United States will experience the death of an immediate family member by the time they turn 18. That's about 6 million kids. If you increase the age at the time of loss to 25, that number skyrockets to 14.7 million young people. It's a lot more common than you may realize. 80% of these people said it was the hardest thing they've ever had to face, but 57% said the support they received waned after 3 months. I think it takes a lot longer than 3 months to process the hardest thing you've ever had to face, especially considering that the majority of people say it takes at least 6 years before they can move forward. Unsupported childhood grief has been associated with developmental disruptions, including poor academic, relationship, and career functioning, as well as substance abuse and severe mental health challenges. I want to make sure every child has the necessary support to grieve however they need, so they never have to deal with the further repercussions of an already extremely painful childhood. I wasn't unscathed. And like I said, I don't sugarcoat my experience. After my dad died, I started battling anxiety and panic attacks, among other mental health struggles. I stopped taking care of myself. I wasn't eating, and I wasn't sleeping. I had no self-esteem, and I felt like I didn't deserve support. To this day, I have a really hard time making and maintaining relationships because I am so terrified of losing someone again that I feel like it's not worth it to put in the effort. I still have to remind myself daily that I am deserving of support. I am deserving of a shoulder to cry on, a friend to talk to, someone I can count on. I still struggle too, and I want to make sure to minimize these potential years-long effects of grieving for every other child who will grieve after me. As much as I want to stand here and tell you all that there's a right way to be there for someone, I can't do that. Everyone grieves differently. Every single person and every single bond is unique, and I would be extremely out of place if I gave you hard and fast rules. That said, I can definitely mention some things that people commonly do that maybe aren't so helpful. I'm a firm believer that the least effective thing you can do for someone is nothing. Please don't avoid a child who is grieving. If they've explicitly asked for privacy, that should be respected. However, privacy and ignorance are 2 very different things. Giving someone well-deserved space to feel and process their emotions is not the same thing as avoiding them. As a child who was avoided, I can certainly say it was incredibly hard. And whenever someone did choose to talk to me, I was always told that I was handling my grief so maturely. But they didn't know how I was handling it because they never asked. They had no idea that I was bottling that pain so deeply that it turned into genuine apathy. It taught me that being silent was what I was supposed to do, so I kept doing it and never asked for help. No child should feel the need to hide their grief. Nothing about that is healthy. But the funny thing is, it felt like the reason everyone walked on eggshells around me was because they were afraid of reminding me that my dad is dead. Which is crazy, because I can never be reminded that he's dead. Trust me, I know. That would be like if I reminded you what your own name was. It's not really something you forget. I've also noticed that generally when you're grieving, you get really good at picking up on others' discomfort. If we're telling a story about our loved one, we can see every millimeter that someone's face moves. We can see you start to look around the room and force a smile and shift your weight between your feet. How is that supposed to make grievers feel when the other person is looking for an out or a way to change the subject? Saying something is almost always better than changing the subject. Now, I say almost always because I personally have never met another grieving person who likes to hear phrases such as, "They're happier where they are now." "Everything happens for a reason." "You'll be okay." Or even worse, "It's time for you to move on." What? Oh, sure. Like I can just decide, actually, you're right. I don't miss my dad anymore. Him being dead is better than him being here. I'm completely over it. Take a minute to think about why we tend to say these things. What do you think a grieving person gets out of that? Do you think it makes them feel better? Or does it make the person who said it feel better, having done something? Look, I get that it's hard to know what to say. From a grieving person's perspective, there is not much you can say that's going to make us feel better. Well, when the day comes that words can bring people back from the dead, then maybe words will help. It's okay to not know what to say, because I think one of the best things you can do to support a grieving child is just listen and be there. Their entire sense of what's normal was just ripped out from under them. They're not going to be okay. And that's okay. Be a shoulder to cry on or a listening ear. Show children that there is great strength in vulnerability. Acknowledge that they are going through something excruciating and don't pretend like it isn't a big deal. It is a big deal. It's a huge deal. When we have these conversations about the grieving process, more and more children will be able to show their grief without fear of being mistreated, judged, or avoided. That's the goal. Now, I want to share with all of you a quote from my favorite musician, Ryan O'Neal, known under the name Sleeping at Last, that really stuck with me. He said, and I quote, "I share this with you because grief is more harmful when it's hidden away. Unfortunately, it needs to be invited to dinner and to Christmas and even into the new year. The people around us won't know what to say to it sometimes, and neither will we. But being with us, where we are, matters a lot. Even writing this out feels like pain and healing all at once, and that is the point." End quote. Pain and healing all at once. Yeah, that's about what I'm feeling right now. And yes, that is 100% the point of these conversations. Earlier, I mentioned that most young people said it took 6 years to move forward from the death of a parent. I myself just recently passed that 6-year mark, and I am definitely still processing. Some days I feel exactly how I felt the day he died. Other days the pain is more subdued, but it's always there. Always. Seeing that some people were able to pinpoint when they considered themselves moving forward surprised me, but there's no timeline on grief. I also had to remind myself that moving forward is not necessarily the same as moving on. Here are some things I've accomplished since my dad died. Graduated from high school, I was admitted to Northeastern's Doctor of Pharmacy program as an incoming freshman, and I earned my white coat as I entered the professional phase of my education. And let's not forget that I am standing here in front of all of you today, which I am so incredibly proud of. Now, what you don't see is that I spent the entire day before graduation, which was also my 18th birthday, crying over the fact that he would never see me graduate. He'll never know that I chose Northeastern or pharmacy school. He wasn't sitting in the audience when I got my white coat, and I don't have the words to express how heartbroken I am that he isn't sitting right there with my mom today. The point is, I may have taken steps forward by accomplishing these things, but I haven't moved on. I carry that grief with me through the highs and lows of life. Moving on feels like I'm leaving him and his memory behind, which is the last thing I want. I'll keep talking about him, and I'll keep talking about my own unique grieving process to help other grieving kids feel less alone. Even if only one person is able to get something out of this, that's one more person than yesterday. That one person can catalyze hundreds of conversations, and that makes all of this worth it. As for me, I'll keep starting more conversations too, even though I'll never be ready to move on. It might be time to start thinking about taking another step forward. If not for myself, then for every grieving child who may benefit from hearing my story. Thank you.